All right, so I'll be able to share that recording with you all after this for the addition to the live stream. Good evening, everyone. My name is Amanda Preston Sakari. I am a senior consultant with Public Consulting Group, and I was one of the leads on the equity audit with you all over the course of the last school year. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can everyone see the slides that are up there right now?
Yes.
Thumbs up, great. All right. So, just a quick overview of what I'm going to talk about this evening. Go into a little bit about the equity framework and how we approach this equity audit. I'm going to share from the full report the 4 priority recommendations that came out of that report, as well as some examples of related findings there. This is obviously not the full report. As you all know, the full report is very long. So it's just a quick snapshot of that. And then want to clarify some questions that we've received, and then of course open up to your questions as well. So starting with the equity audit framework, this we like to do just to make sure that we're all on the same page of what we're talking about. And so thinking about what is educational equity. So educational equity means ensuring each student receives what is necessary for their success, for successful academic, emotional, and social outcomes. Educational equity is making sure every student gets individualized resources, that all necessary supports are provided, and that academic rigor and supports to meet that rigor are provided. Where I think some we've heard some folks get frustrated is thinking about educational equity as removing necessary resources. That's not what that is, or lowering expectations for certain groups, or reducing academic rigor for certain students. So want to make sure that we're really clear on that. So it's really looking at the needs of every individual student with a particular eye on those students who have historically marginalized identities, or who have historically been treated with low expectations for a variety of reasons. So related to that, what is an equity audit? So an equity audit is looking at the policies, the programs, the practices, the culture of an organization or an institution from an equity lens. And an analogy that I like to use is if the service, so at the schools, it would be, providing an education. For this analogy, if the service is providing shoes, equality means that everyone gets a pair of shoes, but equity means everyone gets a pair of shoes that fits them. And so an equity audit is figuring out who everyone is, what shoes are needed, what sizes everyone has, and how to figure that out. And as an important reminder, before I dive into some of the methodology and findings, is that this equity audit is meant to be a tool for you all to use moving forward. It's a snapshot of North Kingstown in this one point in time, and it is by no means exhaustive. And so it's really meant to be a supportive piece of work for you all to take and run with. And in this equity audit with North Kingstown, we had 6 focus areas, which are laid out in 6 individual chapters in the full report. Leadership policies and practices, professional development, culture and climate, discipline, student outcomes and access to advanced learning opportunities, and resource allocation. And aligned with those 6 focus areas, we had some kind of broad guiding questions. For those of you who participated in focus groups, interviews, the survey, we asked a lot more questions than this, but these were the kind of overarching questions, really figuring out within each of these focus areas, what does that look like from an equity lens in North Kingstown? What are the things that are going well? What are the things that are opportunities for growth or change to help make North Kingstown an even more equitable and welcoming and inclusive district? So our methodology, how we went about this study. We had a lot of data sources in this study. We had interviews. I know that I got to speak with several of you, as well as current and former colleagues. We had individual interviews with members of district leadership and school committee members. We held 8 community focus groups that were advertised by the district, and had spoke to 46 folks across those focus groups. And the surveys, we had at the very beginning of the equity audit, a survey called the Leadership Readiness Assessment, the Leadership Equity Readiness Assessment. And that was really meant for district leaders and school building leaders, just to kind of see where folks were at the beginning of this equity audit. And we received responses from almost everyone. The student survey was sent out to all middle and high school students, and we received over 380 responses. And then a community survey that went out to everyone. We got over 1,640 responses to that survey, which was an incredible response from the North Kingstown community. And then in addition, we collected and analyzed a lot of other data, both from the district, from publicly available sources, from RIDE, things like that. All of those are laid out in the full report. 2 pieces that you'll see in the full report that I just wanted to touch on here. One was what we call our strategies analysis at a glance. And the idea is that at the beginning of each chapter, there's a table like this that's kind of a high level, where are we at a glance in this area? And so it's tied to evidence-based strategies and things that you'd want to see in an equitable district. And so it allows folks to take the report in chunks as necessary in chapters and get a snapshot of that focus area. And a few things to note here: any determinations there were made based on the data collected from the district, publicly available sources, and stakeholder engagement efforts. A yes means that it was fully observed or agreed upon. A partial means partially or inconsistently or not necessarily agreed on. And a no means that PCG did not observe this over the course of the audit. That does not mean that it is a definitive, no, this is definitely not happening or is not done in the district. It is a snapshot of, in the moment of this audit, the PCG team did not observe this in the data or documents collected. And the other piece, which you may be familiar with because the state does some of these risk ratio analyses as well. We use a risk ratio analysis when looking at discipline and IEP referral and assignment rates. And the reason why we do this is because, especially in districts similar to yours, where different populations of students can be very small, solely relying on a proportionality analysis, so solely saying, you know, of this many students, this many received a discipline referral, because that can be skewed by, you know, the addition or subtraction of one student or one disciplinary referral because of the small population. However, a risk ratio analysis allows us to see a more true picture of that disproportionality, because what it's saying is, what is the risk as a single student? What is the risk of you receiving a disciplinary referral compared to anyone else in your school? And so using these calculations, we feel like paints a more accurate picture of either disproportionality or proportionality in these situations. And you'll see a few examples of these shortly. So, priority recommendations and examples of related findings. And again, all of this is in the full report in a lot more detail, but wanted to share this as a starting place for our conversation tonight. So there were 4 priority recommendations from the equity audit. Number 1 is to set a clear vision and common language for equity across North Kingstown. Number 2 is to develop a district-wide equity policy. Number 3 is to prioritize equity-focused professional development. And number 4 is to review and revise discipline practices and policies from an equity lens. What you'll see here is a few examples of findings from the report that informed this recommendation. So what you see here is some of the qualitative analysis that was done around the vision of equity and the common language of equity in the district. And so these are just some of the examples of how we came to the conclusion that this was an area that needed to be focused on. Similarly here, this has some examples of both qualitative and quantitative findings from the report. These are not exhaustive findings related to this, to any of these recommendations. It's just examples to show kind of how we piece this together. So as a team, we wrote the findings first. And so then as we're looking through them and seeing common findings and things that seem to come to and rise to the surface, that's where the recommendations are developed from. Around professional development, same thing. We analyze professional development documents, policies, records, as well as the Leadership Equity Readiness Survey and the other open survey responses and focus group responses. And so this was one of the priority areas. There's not been any equity focused PD since 2019. And many folks across the district want it and express a need for it. And so that was something that we thought needed to be elevated. And finally, the discipline practices and policies. There were examples kind of anecdotally shared in focus groups, but then survey responses also backed up some of these findings, as well as an analysis of bullying policies. And then what also related to this recommendation were some of those risk ratios that I just talked about. So for example, these are disciplinary referrals district-wide. This data was provided by the district. And so what you can see here is all across the district, African-American or Black students were 2.52 times more likely to receive a discipline referral than any other student in the district. Hispanic or Latino students, 1.92 times as likely, and folks of 2 or more races, 1.61 times as likely. And what you see below is that students who are eligible for the free and reduced price lunch program are 3.25 times as likely as all other students to have received at least one disciplinary referral in the district. And this note is included here on this slide. It's also included in the report. There are subgroups that were not reported due to small numbers. So one of the questions that we've received is why Asian students were not included in this analysis, because there's the same number, approximately the same number of Asian students as African American or Black students in the district. However, we did not include them because there were fewer than 10 Asian students who had received a disciplinary referral. And similar with American Indian or Alaska Native and Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander students. And we do not report for student confidentiality reasons. We do not report student groups where either the all students number or the students with disciplinary referrals is less than 10. We then took a look beyond just disciplinary referrals and looked at suspension rates at the middle and high school levels. And what you see here is at the middle and high school levels, Black students were 7.19 times more likely to receive a suspension than any other student. Students of 2 or more races were 8.43 times as likely to receive a suspension than any other student. And those students who are eligible for the free and reduced price lunch program were 6.74 times as likely as all other students. These are just a few examples of the risk ratios that are included in the full report. There are more broken down by gender and some other categories. And again, you'll see in the note here, Asian, American Indian or Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander students are not included in this analysis because there were fewer than 10 students with suspensions documented in the data. And just before we open it up for some other questions, just wanted to make a note that included in the full report are deeper dives into each of those focus areas, including research-based best practices, the strategies analysis at a glance tables, key findings in each chapter, and a total of 34 recommendations throughout the report. And there are additional analyses and data visualizations looking at RICAS outcomes and risk ratios around IEP assignments. So there's, as you are aware of, a lot more in the full report than was here. And a couple things that I wanted to clarify before opening up for questions based on questions that we've received. One was around why were revisions made to the original version of the final equity audit report. PCG made a data sourcing error in analyzing the graduation rates for North Kingstown and pulled the graduation data for the state of Rhode Island instead of for the district. The team corrected that error and reviewed all the other data sources and tables before resubmitting the revised report to ensure that they were all accurate and pulling the correct data. In addition, the RIDE Data Center website updated on January 30th, 2023, which was the day before we submitted the original report, which resulted in almost all of our links being broken in our citations. And so we also revised the report to go through and make sure that those links were not broken and led to the correct data sources there. And then the other question that we've received is around feeling like some of the recommendations provided are similar to recommendations provided to other school districts. And I just wanted to clarify that we develop all recommendations from research-based best practices and our team members' areas of expertise. And that means that depending on the focus area of the study, those recommendations will be aligned. For example, if two districts both lack clarity around an equity vision, they'll both have a recommendation to prioritize the development of statements and communications around equity, because this is a foundational strategy for increasing awareness of and buy-in for equity work. And so while our recommendations are grounded in the same best practices as all of our equity work, they are tailored to North Kingston's context and priorities, and had those discussions with the team working on this report and thinking about how to prioritize and frame some of those recommendations to make them the most useful to you all.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Amanda. So I'll open it up to questions from the committee.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you for coming in and answering those questions. I don't specifically have any questions because I've asked you that you tell them that I have this process. But I just wanted to thank you for clarifying. And I just wondered if briefly you could touch on what you feel would be the one thing to let people know in the district who might be hesitant about the audit or the results of the audit. What would be the one thing that you would say to anybody who might have questions about it?
Sure. I think that I heard that correctly. What would I recommend saying to folks who may have questions about the audit?
Yes, please.
Okay, great, thanks. I think that one of the things that I find really important, which I put in those first few slides as I was talking, and I can share these slides with you all as well, is that this equity audit never was designed as a kind of comprehensive longitudinal research study. It was meant to come in, we were meant to come in, study this snapshot, build this snapshot of where North Kingstown is in this moment. And that involves perceptions, that involves a lot of anecdotal and qualitative data, as well as the quantitative analysis. We were not tasked with analyzing things like trends over time and other kind of layers of statistical analysis. That being said, the data that we did use and develop is all solid, and we think it's a really useful place to jump off of. In that the idea behind this equity audit was not to say this is the definitive statement of everything going on around equity in North Kingstown. Instead, this equity audit was meant to come and hear so many voices. The fact that we got almost 1,400 people responding to our surveys, we heard a lot of voices, and we were able to capture a lot of those stories in this report. And individual stories are the foundation of equity, especially in schools, in communities like North Kingstown, where different populations may have smaller numbers and may not be as vocal or visible to everyone. And so we hope that this report is able to provide a bit more insight into the experiences of folks that may not be seen or heard from as frequently or as often in the community and in the schools. And so I think that taking this equity audit study for what it is, which is a snapshot and a tool to help you all move forward, I think is the way that it can have a really great impact.
Good evening, Amanda. My name is Tom Brady. We have met. Thank you very much for your presentation. I want to touch on a subject that kind of plays off what Ms. Lima was just talking about. This audit has not been without some controversy in this community. There are a number of people that are uncomfortable with it. One attack that I've seen repeatedly is that they're going to appoint an equity director or officer. I'm not sure what title it would be, and that person is essentially going to be like a police officer or somebody who is here to investigate and root out alleged bad behavior. I'm not sure that's how I see it, but I'm curious, what would you feel would be an appropriate description for a person who is designated to pursue that role as an equity director, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that one of the things that we recommend with hiring a director of DEI, a director of equity, however you all end up naming it, is that this work needs to be intentional. And the work of shifting some mindsets, the work of ensuring that changing some of the ways that things have always been done is hard. And if there is not someone who is dedicated to and focused on that work, it is something, I know I spent 10 years in a school district. I know that it is easy to let that slip to the back burner because there's a fire every day when you're running a school district. And so having a director of DEI, someone whose sole role is focused on moving this work forward, on supporting the leadership in setting goals around equity work, and supporting you all in understanding the direction and thinking through what policies could look like, can be an incredible asset. It's not about policing folks or ensuring that folks are appropriately punished for perceived actions. It's really about making sure that you all don't lose momentum. This work is so important, and the equity audit is an amazing first step to really take a look. And I know that you all have gone through a ton of change over the last year, to say the least. And you are having an opportunity to figure out what North Kingstown School District is going to look like in the future. And this is an opportunity to make sure that it looks like a place that welcomes everyone, that all students feel safe, and that all students feel welcome. And having someone in that role who can spend their time and capacity, which is such a valuable resource in education, on this work, ensures that focus doesn't fade away. That would be kind of our recommendation there.
Just to try to summarize, if I can, do you view this role of a person who is in charge of equity within this school system or this school department as being more of an educative role rather than an inquisitorial or investigative role?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely see that role as being someone who can support with professional learning, really helping folks understand the equity work, as well as someone who can help leaders set goals and make strategic actions towards those goals. I do not at all see a DEI director as being someone who just investigates issues or punishments or things like that. I think that, you know, one of our priority recommendations is that the discipline policies and practices are revisited because there is disproportionality there. I don't think that that is the role of the DEI director. I think that equity just needs to be built into the folks who are controlling the discipline processes anyway. So the leaders of the district who are writing these policies, who are enforcing these policies, who are training folks on these policies, and just having the DEI director be a resource to those folks to make sure that, hey, I'm not sure how to approach this from an equity lens. I don't really know what an equity lens is. What might that look like? The DEI director is someone who could provide that support. I don't see the DEI director as someone kind of interrogating or investigating folks.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions for Katie? Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Hi, Amanda, Frank Colada. On one of the slides, you indicated that recruiting and hiring should be through an equity lens. How does qualifications intersect with that?
I'm sorry, I missed, what should be through an equity lens?
You mentioned in one of your slides that recruiting and hiring should be through an equity lens. How does qualifications intersect with that statement?
Yeah, I think that that is a natural tension that folks have, especially when we're talking about teacher work and school leader workforce diversity, because we know that that's a struggle nationwide around the pipeline of multilingual, multiracial, and other diverse educators is lacking. And so thinking about it from an equity lens means that you're taking a look at the interview questions you're using. You're taking a look at the rubrics that you're using. You're taking a look at the process that you're using for looking at resumes, and you're making sure, am I looking for essential qualifications and qualities, or am I looking at this from my own kind of internal bias lens? Because we all have that lens. We all, it is a known fact. It's called a like bias, where folks are more likely to hire people who relate to them in either in a physical way in their background. We all do it. And so you have to be really intentional about not doing that if you're going to hire from an equity lens. So going through, and again, this could be a place where a DEI director can really help with figuring out those tools, because it's not saying what some folks perceive to be, you know, getting rid of, lowering standards just to ensure diversity. It's about making sure that you're not inadvertently cutting off opportunities for diversity because of unknowingly looking for things that are like you or your background, or what you perceive as being quality. And so really taking a look at other tools that are out there for assessing, especially there are a lot of tools out there right now for assessing teacher candidates that take into account teacher quality while making sure that you're not accidentally prioritizing alike and sameness.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much for the time, and I really appreciate it. And thank you for zooming in. I feel like we were successful with it, so thank you.
Yes, this is great. Thank you all so much. And I will send the recording over right now.
Perfect, thank you.